Thank you very much for joining my keynote, and for those of you who have not yet fallen asleep during the political address of our Minister of Finance, Christian Lindner. This is also going to be a very political keynote, but trust me, it's going to be very lively and much more engaging. So please buckle up and get ready for this keynote, An Empty Planet. What you will see first is pictures that are so well known to all of us. It's the pictures of a world of abundance. This world of abundance was created through a multitude of factors, one of them being the abolition of the gold standard in '71 by Nixon. You guys remember Tricky Dick, the gold standard, the Bretton Woods system? That's gone. And why is it gone? Because people wanted expansive monetary politics. I'm not talking about expensive, I'm talking about expansive. A lot of money means a lot of growth, means many, many consumable products. The other factor which has impacted this abundance was the Moore's law, which sounds like a little thing, but if the transistors on a microchip are inversely proportional to their cost, it means that we have exponential growth in transistors and their prices are going down. That has created everything, all the things we hold dear, consumer electronics, we've consumed over the past decades. And then, last but not least, what we have also seen in the past decades is obviously the globalization of manufacturing capabilities. All of this has led to a culture in which companies would make business in a way as if there were no externalities. What does it mean to make business if there's no externalities? I explain to you in very frank words. If water, clean water, doesn't have a cost, if clean air doesn't have a cost, that leads to companies making record earnings on drilling chemical toxics, which is oil, out of the soil, refining it and selling it to consumers to burn it in their combustion engine vehicles. And that is outrageous. That is a world without externalities. And this world, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this world has come to an end. And you all know the consequences. The consequences are natural disasters, are depleted resources, and the consequence is obviously climate change. Now bear with me and let's talk about what brought this party, the party of doing business with record earnings without a world of externalities, to an end. I call it the party poopers. There's a couple party poopers over the last years, one of them being this microelectron scanning of the COVID-19 virus. We've all gotten to know this virus much more than we ever wanted to, and no one ever knows where it actually came from. But rest assured that it had to do with humans moving way too much into the habitat of animals. So this is one example of bad things that happen in a world without externalities. Another factor, and this is one of the pictures we also see in our daily news feed, and please check out this quote. I find this highly interesting. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has put an end to globalization as we've experienced it over the last 3 decades, and that is Larry Fink, the CEO of the largest wealth manager on the planet. So globalization is over. For now, it's come to a halt. The third thing I want to share with you, and this is the Moore's law I just explained as a graph. So what you can see here, the yellow line, the straight yellow line, is the perfect representation of the Moore's law on an algorithmic scale. It means the transistors, the volume of transistors on a microchip becoming more and more and more over time. This is a perfect curve, as it is typically not existent in economics. But what you can see here, the dotted line is the actual development of semiconductors. So what we can see here, this delta, looks like a little thing, right? There's just 2 lines, and there's a little delta between these 2 lines. It means that our consumerism, the development of our consumer electronics, will not continue the way it has over the past decades. For a very simple reason, because the development of chips, the development of semiconductors, will simply not continue at the same pace, which leads to the fact that this is probably the last evolution of consumer electronics we have seen over the past decades. Now, what does this situation lead to? It leads to a world of scarcity. For those of you who still have a combustion engine vehicle, who go to the pump every day, this is one of the pictures you see every day. This is scarcity. If you think that it's a good idea to trade in your Lambo to one of those fancy Model X's out there, Tesla Model X, it's not a great idea, because electricity prices in Germany have gone up like crazy. So for the first time ever, inflation is back. In my personal life, I haven't witnessed inflation, but inflation is back. and it really hurts society. It is a humongous impacting factor on societies around the globe. Now you would think, and you already saw that I have a bit of a kink with American presidents, right? So here's another one. This is Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson was the one who had the doubtful honor to end the war in Vietnam. So Lyndon B. Johnson was famously quoted, "The perceived reality we're in is like being jackass in a hailstorm. There's nothing to do there but stand it," right? But this is not what we came for. This is not what we came for here, to this event, where we expect serendipity because we're not doomed. This assumption is dead wrong. Now I want to give you a very optimistic outlook on this world, our future. First of all, very important to understand, how does innovation work? Innovation is never a linear graph. Innovation happens in leapfrog-style developments, which means that we as humans are typically always at a point where we don't know exactly which way innovation is going to lead us. The good thing now is, you might have heard about a phenomenon called the singularity. It's by Ray Kurzweil. He's the chief evangelist of Google. He came up with a concept that if there's a confluence of all technologies, things happen that can hardly be estimated, but they will definitely lead to leapfrog developments. And we're just at that point as humanity. So if we are at that point as humanity, we need to deliberately design innovation. And I would like to quote Dieter Rams here, who is the godfather to many, many big designers in the world, to Johnny Ive of Apple. Steve Jobs was a big fan of Dieter Rams. And what he said was that good design is innovative, that good design must be useful, it must be sustainable, and last but not least, and this is the best out of all, it must be as little design as possible. So now if we apply this to one of the phenomena we're all very used to, I call it the example of mobility. It's a big problem, obviously, and the reason for that being is that this is another interesting graph. Cesare Marchetti, he came up with the law, Marchetti's law, that as humans we always travel the same amount of time every day. Started in Neolithic times, in Stone Age, we would walk for 1 hour, 5 kilometers. Now we travel at 15 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour, 1 hour. It always stays the same. It's 1 hour per day. That's the average amount of time you use to travel. Now, if you multiply that with the number of people we expect to live in cities, according to United Nations assumptions, then we get to the flabbergasting number of 105 billion passenger miles in cities by the year 2050. And I don't know about you guys, but that is not the world I want to live in. So the question is now, how can we solve this? What do we have at hand? Which options? And now the megatrends kick in. And fortunately, we have megatrends like e-mobility, like IoT, like the charging infrastructure, which you can use to solve these problems. The future will more look like this, where there's no car ownership, where we see autonomous people movers. We will see shared mobility. Ownership per se is a big problem. To produce a vehicle costs enormous amounts of energy and water. So discard the ownership of the vehicle, get rid of your vehicle. I've done it many years ago, and just try sharing instead of owning. And then last but not least, obviously, electric vehicles, which then need to be powered by sustainable energy. If you wonder if this is a feasible idea of the future, a feasible vision for the future, this is reality today. So rest assured that innovation is one of the drivers that will actually save us as humanity. Now, when it comes to the feasibility of this plan, I personally built my first solar power plant in 2006, so that's a long, long time ago. And ever since, I've been looking at prices of energy for solar power, and I'm beyond proud that what we see now is that solar energy is the cheapest source of energy on the face of the planet. And if we only look at how much energy we need to power the entire energy demand of mankind, we need 500,000 kilometers, which is compared to the surface, cars, only cars, not the roads, only cars will occupy by the year 2050, a thing that I find quite doable. So I think there's a high degree of feasibility. And now, last but not least, let me get to a second argument. First argument for a positive outlook is innovation. The second argument is the development of humanity itself as in population. UN predicts that by the end of this century, there will be a decline in population based on extrapolation of past trends. There is another interesting take on population development, and that is the IAASA development of population prediction. And this prediction is based on very simple additional facts, in this case socioeconomic facts, which lead to a much earlier decline in population. And the biggest driver of this evolution is female education in sub-Saharan Africa. I know this is a tricky one. Wouldn't have thought about this, right? But the more we educate women, the less people will be born in the future. This is as simple as the equation goes. So if you take these two elements, there's so much digital education, there's so much access to education because of the internet. You have all these innovative moments. And then you look at the footprint of us as humanity, and you will see on this chart, clearly see on this animated chart, that from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to nowadays, to modern times, we will see a decrease in footprint over the last decade to a point where it got stagnant, and this trend, this positive trend, will continue over the next decades. Those are the last 10 years. So it flattens, you can see that its CO2 emissions, the curve flattens a lot. So the dilemma we're facing here is less people, much more efficient processes, less industrial output. So no, it's not about economic growth. So we as society have to face the fact that economic growth is something that will potentially not prevail over the next decades. However, with everything we just heard, with the population in decline, with much more efficient technologies, I remain very optimistic. And optimism, as defined, is the doctrine that this world is the best of all possible worlds. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.